In this video, we will be annotating our project. We'll begin with dimensions for both the floor plan, the site plan, and the roof plan, then work our way to doing the elevation tags for the elevations, and then also putting some important dimensions and annotations in our wall section. Previously, we had tagged our doors and windows and created a door and window schedule. So what we did in that case is we created it all in layer 0. What we should have really done is we should have created a layer specifically for the schedules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the G series down here, which stands for general, so that our schedules, what we're using as schedules, can be used either for architectural discipline, structural discipline, mechanical discipline, almost any of them. So we're going to create a layer called G schedule. So we're going to go to the create a layer, and we're going to call it G-SCHD for schedule. Let's go ahead and let's create just a color for it. We can go with 43, that's fine. And I'm going to go ahead with continuous line type, but our line weight is going to be 0.25 millimeters. So we've created that right in there. Let's go ahead and close out our layer properties in here. Let's select both schedules, and let's go ahead and scroll down on our layer panel to our freshly made layer, G schedules, and we've got that laid out in the correct layer. So let's take a look at what we've got happening. It's one of those layers that, depending on the sheet that you're going to be presenting, you're going to want to either have it turned on or off. In reality, the only layer that we want to, the only sheet that we want to see the door and window schedule is going to be an A-2 floor plan. So what we need to do is we need to go back and open up our viewports in each one of the sheets, starting with site plan. And what we can do is then, using the freeze, with the viewport open, using the freeze button, we're going to go ahead and freeze it on the site plan. We're going to go to the roof plan, open up the viewport, using the freeze icon. We're going to freeze it there. And let's see if it shows up on any of the other sheets. It may be out of view, so we don't need to really take a look at it there. Now, once again, when we freeze it in a specific viewport, it stays active in our model space. So that's something that we want to always check and make sure that we're freezing it with the viewport open before we decide to freeze it. So let's take a look at our floor plan. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see if it's properly located. Do I need maybe a little bit more room on the top or on the bottom? So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the viewport. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unlock the viewport, and I'm going to pan it down just a tiny bit so I get a little bit more room on each one of the sides that I'm going to be dimensioning on. So there we go. I'm pretty happy with that one. So let's get out of the command. Let's close it out in here. Now we can select the viewport to lock it, or we can open it up again and lock it at that point. So right now, the viewport is locked. I think positioning is a little bit better than it was before. And I'm going to be ready to annotate the floor plan. I'm going to start with the exterior dimensions and then work our way into the interior dimensions after we finish all 4 sides of the exterior. So let's take a look at our layer properties and let's see what layers are available. Right now we have, if we take a look at the listing of layers, we have one layer which is A Annotations. Now that's kind of a general description of it, and we could use it on every single one of our sheets and views, site plan, etc. But because we're going to want to display them at different scales, such as the site plan being at 1/8 inch and the floor plan being, and roof plans being a 1/4 inch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create another layer for each one of those sheets that I want to do. Now the company you work for or you yourself may want to set this up a little bit different, but we're going to go ahead and start setting it up as I'm describing there. So let's take a look at, first of all, the Annotations has a magenta color with a continuous line type and a line weight of 0.15. I do want to keep it at that. So the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create a new layer directly underneath that one. A-Anno-Dims being the minor group. I'm going to create another minor group behind that, which is going to be FLOR for floor plan. I'm going to keep the colors the same, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm going to make that my active layer. And we talked about before on where is the best place to start adding your annotations. I think one of the dangers of doing it here in Paperspace, and it works perfectly, is that you still want to do it while the viewport is open. Now, what we're going to do in this case is we're going to go ahead and use this with the locked viewport rather than doing it here in model space, because right now we would have to do quite a bit of turning layers on and off here to put our dimensions directly onto the model space here. We want to do it in the model space in the viewport. In addition to if we do it here, we're not quite 100% sure that it's going to fit in the area that we have available to do our drawings. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to start doing the dimensions across the back of the house first, and then we're going to work our way around the house. So the first thing is double check the dimension, make sure you're in the proper layer. We are a Annotated floor. And I'm going to go to the Annotate tab, and I'm going to start with the linear dimensions here, or just go to dimensions here. So making absolutely sure that we are in the right scale, which we are, a 1/4 inch, I'm going to start with a linear dimension, and I am going to start with snap points on the corners first, and I'm going to do first an overall dimension. That's going to come up to, let's place that dimension right about here. Now, a couple of things immediately come to mind. If you take a look at the setup of the dimension is still set up to what our McFadder ACAD template is set up. So even though we changed our units in drawing utilities, our drawing units were set to architectural with a precision of 1/32 of an inch. We also need to do that on the specific dimension style that we're going to be using. So we're using the annotative dimension style, and we want to make modifications to that so that it no longer looks like this and meets our requirements for that. So let's take a look at what we want, and let's go ahead and we're going to click on this little diagonal arrow right here on dimension styles. We're going to open that up. We got our dimension style manager. It's under annotative. That's the one we want. We're going to go to modify. We're going to begin to modify some of these values that are on the tabs up and on top. So starting with the unit format, we want to go to architectural. That's going to be in feet and inches. For now, we can go ahead and leave the dimensions at 1/16 of an inch. Our fraction format is horizontal. What we want to do is not stacked, or we can go to diagonal. For now, let's go ahead and say that it's going to be not stacked. So that's going to place them in a different format rather than horizontal. We continue on down here. Scale factor is going to be good. Zero suppression. Well, when we're dimensioning something, let's say it comes out to be 11 inches. We don't want that dimension to read 0 feet 11 inches. So we want to suppress 0 feet. But if you have something that's an even 3 feet, we still want it to read as 3 feet 0 inches. So we do not want to suppress the 0 in the inches. Unit formats for the dimensions is decimal degrees. That's fine. I'm going to increase the precision to at least 2 in case we have a more precise angle that we want to use later on. So this looks pretty good the way that we're doing it now. Let's go ahead and go to fit. We're going to go either text or arrows. We're going to leave that for now. Text placement. When text is not in the default position, place it beside the dimension line. I'm going to go over dimension line without leader for now. Fine tuning, place text manually. We can leave those blank. And the scale for dimension features, we're going to leave at annotation. Let's go ahead and go to text. So we're going to be using the annotative text style. Let's take a look at what that is. So we're going to click on the little radio buttons right there. It's Romans SHX. The paper text height that we want is 3/32 of an inch high. And our width factor, we're going to go with a width factor of 0.75. And the font itself, Romans SHX, is a nice simple font that is very readable. And of course the size is going to be annotative. So let's go ahead and go set current. We're going to get close. Everything here looks pretty good. Fraction height scale. If that gets a little bit too big, we can reduce this maybe to about, let's go ahead and put that in at about 0.8. That's going to reduce the height so that it doesn't become too much higher than our standard unit. Okay, text placement. This is what's going to change it. If you look at the little preview we have in here, you notice that it's right in the middle of the dimension line. So what we want to do is we want to go above the dimension line. Horizontally, we want it centered. We want the view left to right. That's fine. Our text alignment is we want it aligned with the dimension line. So we want to make sure that is clicked. And then what we want to do is we want to put it as close as possible to the dimension line. That is our text. So let's go ahead and set that up. Let's go to symbols and arrows. Okay, we want to change that from closed filled to architectural tick mark. We're going to go ahead and for the arrow size, we're going to go ahead and change that also to 3/32. Now that might be a little bit too much, so we may want to reduce that just a little bit. Let's go ahead and let's do it as 1/16 of an inch. And we'll see how that looks like, and we can always modify that. So we're going to do that at 1/16 of an inch. Center marks, we can leave it as a mark. Dimension break is fine. Preceding dimension text, all of this we're going to leave pretty much the same. And then finally, let's go to lines. Extend beyond dimension lines. Let's go also there. Let's go to 1/16 of an inch. Offset from origin 1/16 of an inch. This all looks good. Symbols and arrows, line type. Let's do OK. Make sure I always do set current, even though it might be overkill, and do closed. And let's look at how our dimensions have changed here. So there we go. We've got our tick marks. They're nice and small. They're not gonna overwhelm. If they're a little bit too small, we can always increase them. There's our dimension. It's nice and close to the dimension line like we want. And the scale, of course, is correct. So that takes care of our settings for now. And once again, you can change these later on if you find that you run into some problems. The next thing we're going to do besides the overall dimensions, we're going to make sure we're on the Home tab to make sure we're still in the proper layer. Go back to Annotate and continue with Linear. And we're going to start doing the breaks here for the two columns in the back. So we're going to start from the same point. This time I'm going to click to, let's press escape and let's do this again. I snap to the incorrect spot there. The corner here, I'm going to go up just slightly above that. And there's our first dimension from the edge of the house to the edge of the columns. I'm going to go ahead and continue this string of dimensions. Your dimension string should be linear all the way across. Do not start jumping your dimensions from one spot to another. They should stay linear. So I'm going to do and continue. Hit continue here under the dimensions panel. And I'm going to go to the next spot I want to dimension. There it is. For the column, go to the next column. I'm going to zoom in if you have any doubts where you're snapping to. And then finally, always snap. Don't snap to the dimension line. Snap to the item you're trying to dimension. So there's our second string of dimensions for the rear of the house right there. So let's go ahead and let's begin. Our next is the major breaks on the perimeter of the house, the masonry breaks. There's going to be two more sets of dimensions that we're going to do. One is going to be the major breaks, and then what we're going to do is we're going to dimension all the openings. Let's go to linear again. I'm going to click here. I'm going to bring that up to about here. Click the continue button. Continue. And I'm going to work my way around to all the major breaks. There's the next break. And then finally, last one located in there. Hit the enter key. And we've got our next string of dimensions. Now the next thing we're finally going to do is we're going to go ahead and dimension our opening. Now we've got a little bay window with some dimensions at 45 degrees here. So there's a couple things we have to do a little bit different. So we don't need this dimension again this way, but we kind of need to dimension this center of the window from a known corner. So we can take it from here and bring it up, or we can take it from here and bring it down. So let's go ahead, and instead of linear, what we're going to do is we're going to be using the aligned dimension. Now you got to make sure the things that you click here are in line like this. You can't click up here and then somewhere in the middle of the window. You want to make sure you're clicking along the same path of the dimension. So the first one I'm going to do is click there and dimension in there, and I can bring that out to here, and there's my first dimension for that window. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the next window and continue our way around in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to linear. This time I'm going to dimension this one. This one I'm going to go ahead and continue and just finish the dimensions here to double check and make sure that that is centered. There we go. Now I need to do one more in here, so I'm going to duplicate what I've done in here, and this will show us whether both of those are in the same distance from the corner. So I'm going to do aligned. I'm going to go from corner to this point, and it looks like I'm a little bit off. So a couple things I can do in here. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up into here. And what I can do is I can either change my precision to 1/8 of an inch in here, and that should correct them, or I can actually move the window, or I can change the text. Changing the text is not recommended. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to go ahead and go into the model itself, and I might be shifting all of this over 3/16 of an inch over this way. Let's go ahead and let's finish the dimensioning first, and then I'll take a look at that and evaluate it and see what's the best way to handle that. So if you take a look at what we've done, we've got a symbol here, which is our identification for the glazing here, and our extension line, our dimension, is going through it, but it's not blocking the number. Here though, we have a little bit of a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the tag, and I am going to be moving it slightly out of the way. I'm going to take my ortho off, and I'm just going to end up putting it somewhere right in there. That seems to work pretty good. I'm going to go zoom back out, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue a dimension string going all the way across. That's going to be dimensioning the centers of all of these openings, including the sliding glass door. So let's go ahead, and we're going to go back to linear, and I'm going to go from this corner to the center point here, and I'm going to bring that up. Let's go ahead and let's put this string a little bit closer. Now let's go ahead and let's leave it out here for now, lining it up as close as possible with that other string right here. Now we may decide to modify that in order to get this one out of the way a little bit, but we might be able to resolve that later on. So let's go ahead and let's go to continue. I'm going to go to the break. I'm going to go to the midpoint here, go to the break, midpoint of that window, midpoint, midpoint, and then finally the end here. Hit enter, and we can evaluate what we've done, and what we're going to do is we're going to modify some of the items right in here. But that's looking pretty good for that string of dimensions in the back. So what it does, it allows us enough room to put any additional notes that we may want. You could technically bring these in closer from this side over here. So that's something we may end up deciding to do. All right, so that takes care of the rear of the house. Let's go ahead and let's start working our way around to the right. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go linear. We want to do the entire house from front to back. I'm going to go from here to the front, and I'm going to drag my dimension out over in here. Now, some people will dimension from inside the wall out, so they have a better idea on how to place the dimensions next to each other. In this case, we're going to go ahead and go out and in, and then make any modifications we need to. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the major breaks, including what the break is, the vertical break for this column. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to go and bring an extension line all the way back out to here. That's a really long extension line. We already have one right in here. We don't want to clutter up the drawing that way. So let's go ahead and just do linear. And I'm going to create one right here. And I'm just going to place it here so that I can dimension that. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to linear. I'm going to click there. And we're going to start with our next string of dimensions. There's my first one. I'm going to do my next break here. I'm going to go to continue to there, and then I'm going to go all the way to the end right here. Now the last line of dimensions that I'm going to do are going to be the openings. Now we only have one here, but we still need to place it. And we have a couple in here, which technically can be dimensioned here, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring those further in so we don't have long extension lines extending out. So let's go ahead and back to linear. We're going to go from this point here. We're going to go to the midpoint. And we're going to place it, let's locate that guy right about there. Do continue. Continue to there, and then finally go all the way out to the back. So even though this dimension is duplicated, I want to get ahead and added it there. We really don't need it, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that dimension and just leave this one here. That's located. Now I want to go ahead, and there's a couple of dimensions that we need to do. One is going to be for this window in here and the distance from here to here. We've also got a couple of breaks in here that we want to dimension. So let's go ahead, and some of these may actually be exterior dimensions and become interior dimensions as we go up through the interior of the house. We're going to focus on those later on. For now, what we're going to do is we're going to do these two dimensions here. So let's go ahead and let's do linear. I'm going to click on that corner, this corner, bring that up to about here. I'm going to click on continue and click to there. So that gives us our two breaks this way. And now I'm going to do is a linear string of dimensions this way, which is going to locate my windows, both this window and that window. I'm going to go from the end point here to the midpoint. I'm going to place that here. I'm going to click continue, place that to the midpoint there, and for now I'm just going to go ahead and click right to that point. Now once again, you notice that we've got a little bit of an issue in here, so all I need to do is to select what I want to move, enter key, and let's go ahead and move that out of the way. And this one's okay. We could move it a little bit. Since there's not that much around there, we can just bring that down to about here. All right, that's looking pretty good. We may actually have a way of then extending this as a continuous dimension going through here, or we can just focus on this one and then get a secondary string in here to get some of our interior dimensions located here and getting some of the interior dimensions for the garage. All right, so that pretty much takes care of the back and the right side of the house. Let's go ahead and let's focus on the front. And the first thing, just like it is in the back, we're going to go ahead and we're going to dimension using linear all the way in the front. Going to place it right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and do linear, and I'm going to do the major break right here. And the last one I want to do is going to be the door opening for the garage. Now, unlike the other openings, windows, the garage door, we're going to go ahead and we're going to dimension from edge to edge rather than the center. And the reason we do that is because of where the jamb locations are. So I'm going to go ahead and place that here. Now it looks like I can move some of this information a little bit closer to make it look better. So let's go ahead and let's move this one to there. And I'm going to go ahead and move this dimension a little bit closer, maybe to about there. We can always move our title label onto there, including our north arrow. Now I could have brought this to continue this way and do all the breaks here, but once again I'm a little concerned about really long extension lines. We've got them at the edges of the house already, so let's not get the drawing too cluttered up in this area. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a dimension string across here for the main breaks, the masonry breaks, and then we're going to go ahead and do it for the center points of the doors and the windows. Now when we get to this front door, we're only going to do the door. We're not going to do the windows. What we're going to do is we're going to add a note on the schedule to say that they will be abutting each other and that we can give the size at that point. So it's the assembly here that's going to be important, and a detail would eventually have to be drawn to explain that a little bit clearer. So let's go ahead and let's do our linear dimensions for our main breaks. I'm going to do that around here. I'm going to do continue. Let's go ahead and continue. We're going to go to here and to here. Hit the enter, and let's go ahead and let's do the openings. Linear from here, midpoint. Going to place that here. Let's place that around here. Now notice there's going to be some crossing here, so we may want to move one of these, but let's finish our dimension string. And now we can go ahead and make some slight adjustments. If we click in here, we can move this guy. And you notice that there's a number of options available. If you click on the red and hover over it, you can tell there's a number of things you can do. So there's a few things you can do. You can move with the dim line, move text only, move with later, etc. So we know this door is now centered on our opening because it shows 6 and 6 feet. 6'2", 5'2", that's fine. That works out perfect. All right. Now let's go ahead and let's finish off our exterior dimensions for the house by dimensioning the left side. We'll start at the front. We'll go from here. And we're doing, once again, we're going to the outside of the column. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go about the same distance that I did on the right side. I'm going to have two other strings of dimension working right there. There's my first one. I'll do a linear. We're going to do the major breaks. Now there aren't that many breaks on this. The first one's going to be back here. I'm going to bring that to here. Going to do continue. The end there, and then let's go to the end of the column, and we'll do exactly the same thing for the column that we did on the column on the other side. We're going to go ahead and put a dimension here and just bring it out a little bit of a distance out from that. Okay, so now the final string of dimensions that we need to do for the exterior is going to be the centers of all our openings in here. We don't need to do this one anymore because we've got our diagonal, our aligned dimension here, taking care of that one. So let's go ahead and let's go to linear, and we can start here. We're going to go to the middle. So make sure you snap to the point that you want it at. Going to put that in here. Going to do continue. Center point there. Center point there. Center point. And finish up on this corner. Let's go ahead and back out of that. Close our viewport, zoom extents, and what we have is a fully dimensioned floor plan. There's a few things that we can still adjust to bring some of the dimensions closer together or further away. For example, we can bring this one down a little bit. This one is crowding this next one in here, so we may want to bring those down. Again, there usually is a standard that they want to do this, but what we're going to do is we're sort of going to visualize this. Let's go ahead and open up the viewport, and what I want to do is I want to move this string of dimensions, so I'm going to highlight them. And I'm just going to move them a little bit. I could use the stretch command, by the way. I can go to the Home tab, use the stretch, make sure to grab them all by here. Enter and just move it the distance that I want to move it. This was very minimal in terms of what we wanted to move. And this one we're going to go ahead. This is a single dimension, so I can bring that out by just gripping it right in here. Pulling that out a little bit, and let's go ahead. This one is only 2 dimensions, or 3. So I can highlight those, and let's see if all of them move or not, or if just one of them moves. Let's go ahead and bring that only to about here. Now if you take a look at it, they did not move, so I would have to do those individually. And you can snap to that point. And you can snap there. That looks pretty good. And let's just bring this one just down a little bit. Now, this is considered fine-tuning. I mean, it's more for how you want your drawing to look than actual information that is going to be missing. So the important thing is, remember, this is almost like an art also. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to move our door schedules, and I'm going to bring them in just a little bit to the right in here, since we already know where our dimensions are going to be. Put ortho on, and I'm going to bring them in just to about here. You don't want any information too close to the left edge of your drawing, especially in 24 by 36 sheets. This is where the binding is going to go. And as you open up sheet by sheet of the plan set, whatever is closest to the margin is sort of is lost at times. I mean, you have to really open it up quite a bit to get all the way over to this corner. So you don't want to draw too close to the corner. Sometimes you can't avoid it. So I think what we've done is we've pretty much finished dimensioning the exterior of the house. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to be starting to dimension the interior of the house. In dimensioning the interior of the house, we get into some areas that can become relatively small. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to open up a viewport, still locked. And what I need to do is I probably would prefer to draw some temporary horizontal guidelines so that I can see where a good dimension string would occur that would not interfere or be too close to walls, allow for the dimension numbers to be clearly above it, again, without interfering with the walls. So there's a couple of ways to do that. You could just draw a line in the same layer and delete it as soon as you finish your string. If you notice my crosshairs are set to 100% across. It helps me in aligning where I might want something. Then the other option is to create a construction line. For that, you may want to go to a construction layer. Let's see if we've got one in here. Yeah, we do, construction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Home tab under the Draw panel where it says Line. I'm going to click on Draw. And if you notice, you have some other options in here for polylines. One of them is known as a construction line. So if you bring that in there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start, and I'm going to place a line where a location might be a good location to put a string. And I'm going to go ahead and click it, and I'm just going to stretch it to the right and press Escape. So what we've got there is we've got a temporary line that actually extends eternally in space. So if you go even to the model and you start zooming out, you see that that construction line goes all the way across everything. So I'm going to use that, and I think that actually works pretty good. Once I start my dimensions, I can then delete it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my A Anno Dims for the floor, make that my current, and I'm going to go back to the Annotate tab, Linear Dimensions, and I'm going to start dimensioning first with the wall, and I'm going to place my dimension line directly on where I wanted, where I created that construction line. I'm going to go to Continue. Now, if you notice, some of these dimensions are coming and they're kind of crowded in here. What we're going to do is we're going to be moving them out of the way. So we want to make sure is we got to think like a contractor. So we need to let them know where the location of the wall is and what the thicknesses of the walls are. Some architects do it a little bit different. They'll just dimension one side of the wall and then have wall types so that they'll know exactly, by tagging the walls, they'll know how big they need to make them. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and dimension every single one of the walls. Now, some of these you can dimension right there. Once again, thinking like a contractor. All right, he can build these walls here, can build this one, can build this one. We do not have to dimension our doors. They are tagged, so they will be a schedule giving the size. Or we do not have to, unless it's a specific distance that we want, we do not have to dimension them from the edge of the walls. I'm going to dimension this wall. I'm going to go ahead and dimension here. And I'm going to finish off with this wall right in here. I'm going to hit Enter. I'm going to click my construction line. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And now let's see what we've ended up with. And we are going to need to make some adjustments. So let's start from the left and work our way to the right. Typically what I like to do is anything that falls inside of a wall, unless it's very clear, I'm going to go ahead and move out of the way. Even including these 4-inch dimensions right in here. I'm going to take ortho off and bring that down to here. Now I could have set, one of the settings that I may need to do is to put this beside the dimension line rather than having to go through each one of these to modify it. So let's see if we can modify that in the settings. So let's go ahead and let's go to our Annotate tab, Dimensions, Annotated. Let's go ahead and modify this. Take it, go to the modification. It's going to be under Fit. So let's see, right in here we have over dimension line without a leader if it does not place. So I'm just going to click right in here and put beside the dimension line, do OK. I always click that, set current, and if you notice what ended up happening, it went beyond, it went next to the dimension line, but it went quite a bit over. So I'm going to go ahead and I need to modify these a little bit. It actually might even have a line going across it. So let's go ahead and let's go back and let's do a little modification. That's not exactly what we want to happen. So besides over dimension line with leader, if there's not enough room to place both text and arrows inside extension lines, the first thing to move outside the extension line is arrows, text, both text and arrows, always keep between extension lines. Let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's do OK. Close. And it puts them back into there, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to move them out of the way. Grab that one. So what I want to do is grab that into there. All right, that doesn't seem to work out too well either, so let's go ahead and let's make one more modification. I think maybe the first one we had was probably the one to continue with, but it's something that you can take a look at. Let's go ahead and let's move this guy over there. That's no longer working for me. So let's go ahead and let's try it one more time. I don't think what I did was I saved it, modify. So we were over dimension line without a leader is what we did. So let's go ahead and do that. Set current, close, and we're back to where we were. The distance is a little bit too much, but we can always move that down to here. Not a problem. Now this one's starting to get a little crowded in here, so let's go ahead and let's move this one down first to here. What we need to do is to find the best locations for some of these. So let's go ahead and move this one over to here. Ideally, you don't want to move anything below the dimension line, but we're having some problems with this one here. You notice the one was not very clear where it was, so we can probably bring that maybe down to here. Bring that up a little bit so it does, so we keep our extension line or our dimension line showing. Okay. This one we want to bring up into here. Same thing with this one, and we're going to modify this. We're going to go ahead and move this out of the way. That one looks good. Let's go ahead and modify this one out of the way. All right, so there's our first string of dimensions for the interior. This is not an ideal situation, but it's something that we may have to live with at this point. We've located all of these walls along this part of the house, the interior walls. We've got two dimensions. We really want to move this guy down to there. I accidentally moved it out of the way. This whole string, that looks good. That looks good over in there. Let's go ahead and let's fix this one. I'm going to go ahead and move this guy down. Snapping to there. And let's bring that one down with us. Alright, so let's start with the next string of dimensions. There's a string in here that we want to do for the kitchen. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to focus a little bit on getting some of these other dimensions going across. What we want to do is start locating all of these walls across here and all of these walls possibly in here. So a couple of ways, once again, we can do that. We can go to our construction layer. We can create a construction line. Let's see where we may want to place that so that we can put some clear dimensions in here. Let's say somewhere around in here looks pretty good. Turn on our ortho, place that there. Let's go back to our ADIMS floor layer, Annotated tab, start our linear dimensions, and we can start here. Now, I'm not going to do the exterior wall because we've already dimensioned it here, so we don't need to duplicate that. I'm going to go here and put my first string right there, and I'm going to click continue. Go ahead and do this one. I'm going to go ahead and dimension right to this corner, and then continue here. Whoops. Do U. We'll undo. I want to get these walls, take those. This one we're going to do somewhere separately. Take care of that one. And once again, I've already dimensioned this wall here with the 8. So I'm just going to go ahead and stop right at this point. Hit enter. I'm going to delete my construction line. And there's my next string of dimensions. And I'm going to do some fine tuning right now. I'm going to bring that one, take my ortho off. Bring that to here. Bring that to there. Now I know that there's definitely a setting to where this should not be happening. So we'll re-explore that in another video, so that we don't slow ourselves down in completing this one. Now this one's going to be a little bit tricky on where's the best placement. I'm going to go ahead and place that here. That's still very readable on what that dimension is. And that is our next string of dimensions. The contractor can lay these walls out, the locations for all of these walls. All of this is cabinetry work. If you wanted to do an interior elevation of this or do some dimensions for this, you could, as a separate set of drawings. Okay. So we've got these walls laid out vertically. We've got, this is going to be a decorative column, it's non-structural, so we've got the edge location right in here. Now let's go ahead and let's just do a couple of fine-tuning things in here. For example, we could continue this dimension and extend it all the way across so we get a pretty clear idea of what the size of the garage is in here. So what we can do is we can go to continue. And what we need to do is you have some options here. So I'm going to go ahead and select. And I'm going to select this dimension. And if you notice, I can now use that as my guideline and continue my dimensions in this direction. So I'm going to throw one dimension in here. And I now know that this is going to be an 8-inch masonry wall. I'll bring it out to here. That works out pretty good. Now there's going to be some specialty dimensions in here that I want to dimension. I want to dimension exactly what my cabinetry walk space is between my center islands and so on, and I also want to be able to locate where this wall would be. This wall's already been located up in this string. So let's go ahead and let's add a linear string. And this one I'm going to set up and probably do maybe right through here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the linear. Start from the wall to the cabinet. And I'm going to maybe put my string, you know, I might put the string just right up in here. I think that's going to be a better solution. I'm going to do continue to here, to here, and then I'm going to go ahead and give what the clear space is in here, and go ahead and go to there. Again, a little fine tuning works for me there. All right, so we've got that location, which is good. A couple of things in here. I think all of these will fit in there pretty well. This one is a little bit of a problem. So we may want to do a little bit of adjustment in there, but I think that may be okay for now. I'll go ahead and move this one just a little bit more down this way. Take my ortho off and move that to about, that's probably why I didn't move it, because I did not want. There we go. Looks a little bit better. So the contractor should understand that these walls line up all the way down from the top to the bottom. So the big question is, do we need to put another string of dimensions across here? I'd rather be safe than sorry, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to do just a quick string from here to here, and that should give more than enough information to do that. So I'm going to do linear. I'm going to do it from here to here, so we know what the width is of our shelving. Do continue to there. And I really don't need to do this because we've got that dimension already set up in here. If I wanted to, I could pretty easily do that, but let's go ahead and let's just leave that. In architectural dimensioning, unlike mechanical drafting, the dimensioning for that, there really isn't too much of a fear of what we call over-defining an object. As you can tell, we've already over-defined the width of the object here. In the back and in the front, the left and the right is a repeated dimension. But again, we're talking about much larger objects. I think clarification in this case is important. So there's a school of thought that says, no, we shouldn't put any extra dimensions that we don't need. The other school says, let's put enough dimensions in case that they can verify and find out if there's some issues or errors. So, okay, I think we've got that located. All these walls are located down in here, but we haven't located this wall. So let's go ahead and let's just do a quick little string. We can do it from this wall, which we know where it is, and I'm going to bring it across this way and tell them what thickness wall that is. So we're going to go to linear. I'm going to start at this point to here, and I'm just going to lay that out and do continue. And I think I may have snapped accidentally to a spot which was not correct. There we go. So once again, you got to be real careful with your snapping of the drawings, that you're snapping to the proper spot. Alright, so we've got that going. That seems to work pretty well. Now let's continue with some of these vertical dimensions. I think we're good with this one. I think what we need is one string here all the way up, and what we can do is we can now take this string and take it vertical and dimension a few other items which have to do with these exterior walls right here. There's going to be this wall that we need to dimension, that we want to make sure that we get the location of this wall from the front masonry wall also. So we could technically do a string going all the way across here because we have to dimension this one also. And we can also do a string here where we could locate this one. And let's take a look. Let's start with this one right in here. Now, if I was to continue the string right where my cursor is, it's going to kind of interrupt with the hearth of the fireplace. So the first thing I want to do is I can either do the construction line again, or I can just sort of align it at this point and just bring it about here. That I think would work out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click here, bring this out to about, I don't think I brought it out far enough. Let's go ahead and grab it by here, and let's pull it out to about here. That looks perfect. Let's go ahead and stretch this one. Snap to there. And now we're going to continue this string of dimensions. So let's go ahead and go to continue. Now, because we didn't do this dimension last, we need to go to select. We're going to select that dimension. I'm going to go ahead and dimension that. And I'm going to start dimensioning all these walls in this direction. Now I'm going to dimension the walls on either side of the fireplace, but I'm not going to dimension the opening. We can take that distance there when we find and specify the fireplace. I'm going to go ahead and dimension this wall. Now here's an important break that we missed before. I'm dimensioning that break. And then here we can do two things. I can dimension just to here, and I have that separate string in there, or I can actually dimension it, the column here, and go ahead and delete this one. So that looks cleaner because it's part of this dimension string that we've got. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to fine tune our work in here. I can move this guy over a little bit so I make more room for this dimension right here. This one I don't want to be interrupted by that, so I can just bring that down a little bit. That looks fine. This is still just a little bit too close, so I'm going to bring that out a little bit. Now we can dimension, we can know the distance here, distance, distance, distance. All of these walls are dimensioned. We still have this one that we need to dimension, so we have to make a judgment call on there whether we need it or not. We still need to dimension where this wall is, so we might want to tackle that with a quick string. I think one string here is important. Also, the end of this wall is important to dimension, so we can do a couple of more isolated dimensions here. We do have the width already of the hallway, so I'm going to put this one right here, and I'm going to do continue, and then continue to the end here. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's fine tune it. Still a little bit close to the sink, so what I might do is just move this whole grouping slightly over. I'm just going to grab them. Making sure ortho's on, I'm going to pull it this way. Now the reason I can do this is because typically what you want to make sure is when you're clicking an endpoint like this, you want a separation here, okay, from the object itself, or the first of the extension lines. But when you're dimensioning inside, you don't have that situation occurring. So I was able to just grab the dimensions and pull them over without actually stretching it so that the point in here maintain its distance. We didn't have that situation in here. All right, so we've got that dimensioned. All of these are clearly dimensioned. Last ones are going to be this wall and this wall. I think we could tackle those together. Actually, I'm just going to do one dimension here, and I'm going to do an overall dimension here that's going to give them the width of the room, the closet, all the way to the front. So I'd rather do that than have a couple of long extension lines going this way in the room. So let's go ahead and let's do that linear. Now you notice a lot of this ends up being a little bit subjective. So let's go ahead, that snapped accidentally not to where I wanted it to. I'm going to go ahead and dimension from here. And I'm going to bring that right to here. Continue and just get my 4-inch hole. And let's go there. Alright, so we've got that dimensioned right there. Let's go ahead and let's do our full string here. Now I'm going to go ahead and dimension this wall here, and I'm going to also dimension this wall in here because we have not dimensioned them anywhere else. So let's go ahead and let's pick our string. I could do that again with a construction line. I can sort of tell because of the way my cursor is set up that this would be a good location for it, probably right maybe around here. Let's bring it in a little bit more. So even though we're going to be cutting through the windows, I think that's fine. I just want to make sure we've got enough room in here to read it. The other option is to go a little bit over to this side. Let's go ahead and let's place it around here. We can always move some of this information from here. All right, so let's start here. I'm going to click here and here. I'm going to zoom out so we can sort of verify where it's going to be. Located right there. I'm going to do continue. Snap to here. These right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and snap this exterior wall on the outside. And I'm going to do a little bit of fine tuning to get this done. Pull that up to about there. Now I don't want this in here, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on this side. And I'm going to go ahead and move my tag a little bit out of the way so that it's not interfering with too much. I also want to move this dimension. I'll move it over so that it's a little bit more readable right there. 13 foot 10. Let's go ahead and let's bring this guy. Doesn't really matter if it's outside or in. I personally prefer outside, but in this situation, let's go ahead and leave it right there. Now, one thing you want to do is just give it a last review to make sure that thinking as a contractor, that the contractor can lay out every single one of these walls. We still have a couple of walls that cannot be laid out, and there's a couple of conditions in here that we still need to dimension. As an example, I also want to dimension my distances from the cabinetry to the center island. I need to locate this wall of this closet here, and then I've got another one located in here that I want to make sure I locate also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a string of dimensions here, so we give them the depth of the garage, we'll give them the depth of the dining room to this point, okay, because I don't have the thickness of this wall, but I'm going to go to the edge point here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do another string of dimensions here that'll give me the dimensions for the closet and my cabinetry. I'm also going to go down to the bottom here of the cabinets and dimension from that point to here, and then just to the edge here, and from the edge up to here. So let's go ahead. We can always modify that a little bit. Let's take a look at how we're going to do this. I'm going to start by clicking this wall. So I'm going to put my string somewhere around here. And I'm going to check it, make sure it's not interfering with too much. I can actually move it just a little bit more since I'm going to move that dimension. I'm going to pull that down to here. Then I'm going to do continue. Snap the corners of my wall. Now here's where I can dimension my distance and the size of my island. And I'm going to go ahead and just do the countertop width in there and go to this point. I'm going to go ahead and give the thickness of the wall back there. So now by fine tuning, put my ortho back on. 2 foot 4, 9, 3. Got a little bit of a jam up right here, so I can move this one over, or probably better is going to be to move this one down. That one looks good. All of that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and get our 4-inch dimensions relocated. Okay. That looks good. Take a close look at this again. That's not ideal, where that ends up being located. So we may want to take a look at that later on. In fact, I'm going to leave this dimension off and leave that right to that point. All right, one last dimension here that we need. So we need to locate where this is in reference either to the front or to the back here, and dimension these walls here. So let's go ahead and let's just do one long string here so we can verify that this and this are the same, and then we can also continue and maybe even give them this dimension to this column like we did in the other one. So let's go ahead and let's do a linear dimension. I'm going to start here. Let's take a look at where it wants to be located. Probably the best bet is going to be somewhere right around here. So let's go from there to there. There's our 8-inch dimension. Let's move it a little bit in. Do continue. And we're going to go ahead and duplicate that dimension. You can duplicate that dimension. Go ahead and go to here. Take that to there. And once again, just like what we had in here, we could continue this all the way to here and delete it from here. So what we can do is let's go ahead and let's bring this up, and we'll put that off to the side a little bit. Fine tune this a little bit. Let's try that again. Now, you cannot use the move command. I almost made an error there in using it. Now what's happening is this wants to snap to somewhere where I don't want it to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it way out of the way first, and then bring it to here. Let's get it a little bit further away from there. That looks fine. I'm going to, just like we did in the front, I'm going to go ahead and bring this one to the inside. Let's fine tune this a little bit. Go from there to there. Let's bring that over a little bit more. And there's our next dimension. And this one is pretty readable there, so all right, so it looks like we've almost completed entirely our dimensioning. Obviously, there's a couple of things we want to modify and fix. When we see a dimension like this, we want to make some adjustments and either move the window and by stretching it, moving it that 3/16 of an inch so that this dimension becomes accurate. In addition to that, there's a couple things that are just a little bit odd, like 1'11". Again, construction is modular. That would work out much better by just moving it 1 inch further down, closer to this wall down in here, so that falls as 2 feet. That would be pretty clear. I think everything else seems to work out pretty good. Let's close our viewport and let's do our zoom extents to see how that looks like. And once again, none of this is finished until you're ready to print. There's a couple more things I want to move. So now that we are in paper space, I can go ahead and just grab this. I don't like its location, so I'm going to go ahead and shift it over, and I got to make sure I grab everything. And I'm going to bring that over to about in here. And I'm going to go ahead and move my north arrow to that location. Zoom my extents again. I think everything looks pretty good in here. Make sure to save your drawing. Just save your drawing before we print. And I think what we're ready to do is the next video that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start dimensioning the site plan and the roof plan.